you, everyone, for joining us today on the Viante, New Mexico podcast. Viante, New Mexico is a nonpartisan organization whose goal is to find transparent and accountable information on our state elected officials to find out who is working together to fix our education, crime, and quality of life issues. Today, on our first episode of our first season, we have with us Edward Lujan, along with Viante co-chair and founder Dale Armstrong. I, as always, am Rhiannon Samuel, Executive Director of Viante, New Mexico. And today we're going to talk about how did we get here, New Mexico? We want to have a deeper conversation about how we ended up on the wrong end of so many national lists. I want to talk about why we brought Edward Lujan here on with the show with us. And so I'm going to start with his bio. He was born in Santa Fe, and he is a graduate of New Mexico State University, with a bachelor's degree in agriculture and a master's degree in agricultural education. He is the former CEO of Manuel Lujan Agencies and retired in 1997. He was instrumental in getting the National Hispanic Cultural Center built and is now chair emeritus of it and the National Hispanic Cultural Center Foundation. He is a former chairman of the New Mexico Economic Development Commission, served on the board of directors of the Albuquerque Economic Development Corporation, and was chairman of the State Republican Party from 1983 to 1987, just to name a few of his community leadership roles. Dale, Ed, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Rhiannon.
Yeah, thank you, Rhiannon, for having us on here.
Dale, I am going to kick it off to you and let you start our conversation.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So to me, Ed's like just such a strong pillar of the community, actually for the state of New Mexico. And so I kind of wanted to ask Ed, why did you choose to build and grow your company and family here in New Mexico, and why not somewhere else? So I think you're pretty passionate about that.
Well, yes, I am, Dale. Obviously, just give me a little bit of genealogical history. Our families came in to New Mexico in 1600. We traced it back that far, so we have always been New Mexico and lived in Santa Fe. We were born and raised there, and then I moved to Albuquerque in '68. My father started the insurance agency in Santa Fe, and then I did here, and we opened a branch in Albuquerque. And I think, fortunately, didn't think so at the time, but fortunately they sent me over here. So, but really, and that's why we're here. In New Mexico. New Mexico truly is God's country as far as we are concerned. It's got so much to give that I don't think I don't have any desire. I don't think any of my kids do to live any place else but New Mexico. It does have its problems, big time. Mm-hmm. And so we try to do the best, from my perspective, whatever I can to help get rid of this I can't attitude.
Mm-hmm. I want to dissect a little bit more God's country. Why do you think New Mexico is? What are the elements that make you love it so much?
There's so many things that New Mexico has. One of them is the weather. If you really look at it, none of our weather is severe. But yet, we have distinctly 4 seasons, and they're very distinct. But you don't find them. I feel sorry for the southern part of the country.
Oh yeah.
All of the hurricanes, all of the tornadoes, and we just don't have any. I think we've had in my lifetime maybe we've recorded 7 or 8 tornadoes in New Mexico. They're just not here.
Yeah.
There's so much here. When you begin to look at the natural the things that we have, the oil, gas, air, wind, everything's here. So New Mexico, I mean, when this world was made, the good Lord stopped here and said, I'm going to build this my way. And so New Mexico is that way. That's why I call it God's country.
I agree with that. So I know that you're passionate about your family, you're passionate about New Mexico. Have you been able to keep all your children and grandchildren in New Mexico, or have they up and left?
No, they're all here with the exception of one. And I have 4 children, 14 grandchildren, and 15 great-grandchildren. So all of them are here with the exception of one of my granddaughters and her 4 children. And they live in Singapore.
Wow.
He's
Quite
got
a difference.
job in that part of the country, so they live in Finland. But I've been very, very fortunate. We were able, all of our children, not all of them went into insurance business. All of my boys did. But we've been very fortunate that they were able to stay here. They were able to find jobs that they could stay here. That, unfortunately, isn't the case for everybody.
No, we've ran into a lot of people that's a big deal to them, that they've had family that leave, and I feel pretty fortunate too. All my 2 sisters and 1 brother are still in New Mexico, and the majority of their kids are here in New Mexico. So you've got a long history with New Mexico. Your family has a very long history with New Mexico. When we look at the 3 things that Viante cares about, we care about things that any citizen should care about. We're not after the divisive things, which there are plenty of those out and about. But when we talk about education, crime, and quality of life, right now, in those areas, we have our challenges.
Yes, we do.
And I'm just curious, with your experience, have you found a time in the state's history where we actually excelled in some of those areas? Maybe we can help guide to repeat that or get back to that space.
I don't know that, and I don't mean to be that critical, but we need to look at where we're at and where we're going. I don't know that we've ever been in a place where we can say we're there. A lot of reasons, but I surely can tell you I taught school in the 50s. Okay, nothing's changed.
Wow.
I think, in fact, it's probably gotten worse.
Really?
30% reading rate.
Yeah.
35 or 38%, I think, math rate. And, I mean, they're just we're just not there. And quite frankly, to me, the 3 things that you mentioned, those are the pillars of a viable economic development and resurgence. Okay, I one time they asked me, well, how can we get economic development here? My pure answer is raise education. Period.
It's a pipeline.
If I was, and I hate to say it, but if I was a CEO of a company that was not here and looking to come here, it would be a very difficult decision. Knowing New Mexico and knowing what I know, it would be a very difficult decision for me to bring my company here with those kinds of statistics. Okay.
Yep.
So again, I'm going to get in trouble, but I'm going to. We have in this state, I think, and I've served on Economic Development Commission. I've served on a lot of economic development committees. My big thing really is was that I'm interested in is education, economic development, and the arts, culture, and that. To bring a company in, and I looked at the pluses and the minuses. The culture and the art and those, I'd bring them in a minute.
Mm-hmm.
No problem. I would look at the crime part of it and see that maybe can be repairable very quickly. And so I would say, okay, if I brought my company here, I would be on the forefront of trying to help repair that. Okay. When I look at education, what about it?
Good question.
What about it?
Yeah.
Okay. And so it really behooves all of us to get really interested in looking at education and do our part in trying to move education forward. I have this, cut me off if you want, but we have this poor me attitude.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at poor me, I don't care what it's in, it creates chips on your shoulders. The more chips you have, first you can't run. Secondly, you keep piling those chips on, and then it's very difficult to walk.
Yes.
Okay, and what's happening to us, and it does bother me, it's all poor me. We can't get out of this because we have too many poor people. We can't get out of this because we have too many non-English speaking people.
Mm-hmm.
We can't get out of this because we're rural and we're all of the things that we can't. There's no such thing as can't.
So how do
There's
we overcome
no such
that?
thing as a poor person not being able to learn. I often, my cliche is, when the good Lord made us, He didn't say, I'm going to make you with a small brain because you're going to be poor. And I'm going to make you with a big brain and a smart brain because you're going to be wealthy. He never said that. It's the same brain. That He didn't take sides. Okay? So nobody can tell me you can't learn.
So-
if you go ahead.
Well, no, I don't mean to interrupt, but
No.
I agree with you. This is something that comes up in many conversations around education where we can't help our kids because of X, Y, and Z.
Not
But
true.
how do we overcome
Not
this
true.
mentality that's so prevalent?
I think it's up to us. To be very honest with you, today, New Mexico has been very, very fortunate. We do have a windfall. I had no problem them saying we're going to put half of that windfall into education.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. If that's what the cause is, and I'm not quite sure that's the cause, but if that's what the cause is, fine, we now have it. Okay. We, Viante, Think New Mexico, the Business Coalition, all of us need to make sure that we look at education and say, okay, where are we?
Yes.
Where are we? Are we making gains? In my mind, and oh gosh.
Yeah, it's interesting. So Ed's been talking about education, and it's kind of interesting because my mom was a teacher, and I think she was a very good teacher. I don't know that. I just hear that, but because when it's your mom, you probably look at things differently. But I know one thing that she told me that resounded with me is that she said, you need to get your education or you're going to be digging ditches for a living. Mm-hmm. So I went and got some education, but I'm actually still digging ditches for a living.
But you're doing it. But you're
They're
doing
at
it the right
TLC,
way,
right?
Yeah. But the thing is, I did embrace education within the company, and it's been remarkable how well the people, if you just invest in them, how well they receive that education, and you can teach them actually that I can. It isn't always an I can't. You can do an I can, and we've done that very well as a team. So I agree. So maybe we need to focus on that is just getting people to realize we can, and we've seen it. I've seen it very recently with the soccer program coming in. Boy, you've lined up people, and there's momentum, and things are going along.
And if
21st century problem, cell phones all the time. We're all connected.
and you know, really, if you can get our kids to understand that they can, and then help them, okay, they can. There isn't any. I heard one time the child was a disadvantaged child. Okay? And this person was saying that they're disadvantaged, but they can still learn.
Of course.
They may not learn like we do, okay? But they learn, and they learn different ways. They may not be able to read, they may not be able to do this, but, for example, they'll memorize that book that you read to them.
Yes.
Okay? They may not be able to read it, but they did learn to memorize that book. Okay? They did learn to do this. They did learn to do other things. So if they can learn, okay, everybody can learn. To me, the biggest problem is poor me. Poor me. And we perpetuate that. And if we can get away from that, and we can then, no negatives, and I am being a bit negative, but not in the sense that okay. If we can look at those kids and say, you can learn, and you will learn, and we will teach you what it is, and we know that you can succeed. There are so many very, very poor people that kids that come out of there and boom, they got themselves a good education and boom. Yeah.
So I agree with everything you've said, especially this poor me mentality. And I think that one of the biggest challenges that I face with Viante too is this complacency that a lot of New Mexicans have of, oh, we've always been on the bottom, it's okay. But we are capable of so much more. But I'm curious what you think about, do you feel we're at a point in time where we're going to see that shift? Or being that you've seen it since your entire life, are we just in this rut?
Yeah. I'm beginning to think that we are those that have gotten a good education, those that are in the workforce, that are those that learned that a good education pays, and that they can succeed. I think those young people, Josh is one of them. Okay, those are the young people, and you are too, that say we can. There isn't any can't.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And if we can teach our kids, okay, to me, and I taught school for a long time, teaching is 60% motivation and 40% the technical part of it. Okay? If you can't motivate them, it's the old adage: you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. Okay? The drink is the motivation. Yeah. You can see a lot of organizations today, sports is one of them, that motivates them and says, I can. That's all it takes. It's I can. And that's, I think, it isn't the kids that say I can't. It's the grown-ups that are telling them, I can't. You can't.
Yeah. Dale, you have a really remarkable story out of Magdalena with, I believe it was basketball, right?
Yeah, that was fun. So it was, so we had moved there, and our kids had been in, like, all kinds of sports in Albuquerque, and we moved down there, and there was a little bit of a youth program, and so we got involved. My wife and I both got involved, and we started helping, and then they told my wife, said, you know, the Magdalena girls have never been to the state playoffs. and I guess our oldest daughter was probably 11 by then. And so anyway, we were just doing our thing as parents and helping and doing what we could. But as those kids grew up, when they got into 8th grade, they could actually play varsity. And so that little team that we were working with, 3 of them made it onto varsity at 8th graders, and they made it to state. And the interesting thing is they've made it every year since then. And that was 18 years ago. And so they decided they could. Before that, they didn't think they could. So
that's the whole thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Is if we can get as a state, and I think we're beginning to little by little bit, if we can get to the point as a state that we can. I'll give you an example. I was on the Mountain Vale board many, many years ago, and one of the board members that was from Arizona, was from Phoenix, okay? And he was one of the original members of the, they called the Group of 50, that in Phoenix got together, formed this Group of 50. Part of the Group of 50 was radio people and newspaper people, and TV was just getting started. But okay, and they got them all there. And the first rule of the Group of 50 is no negative, none. You don't talk about Phoenix as poor Phoenix. You don't. It's all positive. And they each took a pledge. Okay? Including the editor of the paper and all of them. They took that pledge, okay? And then they began to work at it. They were smaller than we were. Phoenix was actually smaller than Albuquerque.
Now look at them.
Okay? And they started, those 50 had contacts, and then those contacts had contacts, and so on and so forth. Make a long story short, I think it was Goodyear. One of them had a contact with people from Goodyear, and it started, okay? They brought in the executives from Goodyear for a golf outing for the weekend and so on and so forth. Started talking about, why don't you come over here? It's a beautiful state, and blah, 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 okay? Long story short, Goodyear came,
Mm-hmm.
okay?
Made a difference.
Boom! From there, other businesses came to feed Goodyear, and then other businesses came to feed those that were feeding Goodyear. And before you knew it, everybody was looking at, oh, Goodyear's there. Maybe it's a good place to be. And that's what started the ball rolling for Phoenix.
Mm-hmm.
Look at us, and look at them. I will give you one more example of how we do things. When this New Mexico became a state, Santa Fe obviously was the capital city. Santa Fe had the choice of any of the things that were going on. Okay? They had first choice. Okay, came the prison and the University of New Mexico. Those two came about the same time. And Santa Fe, well, you can't get both. You have to choose. You can get the prison or the university, and whichever one you don't choose will go to Albuquerque.
With the other one.
Okay? Their idea was the prisons have more employees. So therefore we're going to take the prison. And poor Albuquerque got the University of New Mexico.
Oh, poor us.
Poor Albuquerque.
Okay? You see, there's got to be some long thing. There's some good people around. Gary Tongas, for one. Mm-hmm. I'm hopeful, to be very, very honest with you. Governor Lujan Grisham is a bubble. She just moves.
Mm-hmm.
She's got all kinds of enthusiasm. I'm hoping that that's a catalyst to moving forward and getting other companies coming in. My understanding is that one of their philosophies is it's not just the big companies coming in. It's the companies that are already here.
Mm-hmm.
That if each company that's already here hires one, you don't need big companies, in a sense.
Yeah.
You will have a
additional.
robust economic development resurgence. Yes, we do need companies coming out because you need that diversity. You need to move forward. But those are the ideas. Those are the I can do it,
Yes.
and we can do it.
Yep.
So I want to finish with a final thought with you, Ed, about you had already kind of touched on it, but perhaps broaden it. What makes you hopeful about New Mexico's future?
To be very honest with you, the young people.
Wonderful.
Thank
Why?
you. Oh, I'm not one anymore.
Because young people today are optimistic.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, they really are. Most young people that I know, and I'm not just talking about just mine. Most young people that I know do have the can-do attitude. And when you have that, and you have the desire to serve others, and to make this a better place to live in.
Mm-hmm.
And I see that all the time in young people. And so us oldies are going to move out of the way and let the young people do their thing. And it does make me hopeful that's where the pendulum is going.
Mm-hmm.
The pendulum swings, positive, negative, and I think it's going in the right direction. We are fortunate as a state that it looks like for the next 5 or 6 years we will have an abundance of money.
Correct.
I don't mind spending it. I really don't. If it's spent in the right places, and with that windfall, if it's spent on non-recurring programs, okay? Roads, for example,
One-time expenses.
one time. You don't have to build government so high. Okay, that at some point, I can tell you, I've lived through it time and time again. Oil and gas prices will go down.
Yeah.
Okay, and oil and gas prices will go up and then down. And so you got this dilemma of what do we do with all that money? To me, it's not a dilemma. Spend it. I don't care.
Yeah.
Okay? Spend it on the right things.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I think a lot of that is happening, hopefully. So I'm totally optimistic.
Wonderful.
Good.
What a positive interview. I love it. Because it's all about New Mexico we can, and that's what we're trying to do with Viante. We're trying to say that we all have a role to play in fixing the state. As long as we can get together, say what doesn't divide us, what unites us, and let's pursue it with full force. I want to thank everyone who's tuned into this episode today. If you liked what you heard and our common ground themes and diving deep into New Mexico's issues, please check us out at Viante. That's VIANTENM.org. Follow our journey in achieving those things for our great state. I want to thank Dale for joining us today. Ed, thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure.
And thank you to SunWest Trust for allowing us to use their studio. And catch us next time on our next episode. Have a good day.
Thank you.